Supply is going to drive everything, but we know right now that we have a certain amount of supply at the state, and we have to be a full partner in helping get those vaccinations into the arms of the people that need them most.
And that's Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin talking about the supply of COVID-19 vaccines as she works on a plan to ramp up vaccinations citywide. And hey, folks, if your news feed needs a shot in the arm, we got you in the right place here. Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are my own. And joining me is Kevin Schofield of Seattle City Council Insight, who, when he's not writing about politics, he's baking. When he's not baking, he's practicing his guitar. Kevin, I got to ask, when was the last time you had that was free, and what did you do with it?
Last time I took a nap in the afternoon.
That
like
was smart.
naps. Like, we all got to find our coping mechanism to get through, this age of COVID. And, for me, some days it's just a 20-minute nap on the couch.
Well played, sir. I haven't had one of those in way too long. Thank you for bringing back some good memories there. Big thanks to City Grind Espresso, our background noise sponsor for the audio podcast. They're on the first floor of City Hall, closed during the pandemic, of course, but please do support them and other small businesses online. Got some great news this week from our patrons, Arushi and Sergey. Thanks for bumping up your monthly pledge. And thank you, Emily, for jumping in at the $10 level. We really do appreciate it. And what do all of those people have in common? They are the proud owners of a Seattle News, Views, and Brews coffee mug. Just shipped him out. Patron Zach sent in his photo, his mugshot, if you will. He's not actually incarcerated. I'm pretty sure he's not anyway. If you are, break out, Zach. It's all in the name of freedom. And Kevin, I think you're holding up yours too. I'm kind of excited.
Yeah.
This is the good stuff here. I love
This is it. Tasty stuff.
Clink. Yeah. All right. A virtual clink of the good stuff for sure. And folks, if you want a mug, join us in our mug club at the $10 level. But truly, whatever you can give to support local independent journalism, we definitely appreciate it. Thank you very much. Please do become a patron and help us keep this show rolling. Also, thank you to Converge Media. Converge runs the video version of our podcast on their YouTube channel Wednesday nights at 6. All right. We're going to get this party started with right here, right now. So, Kevin, let's start with the mayor's plan to expand vaccinations in the city. The mayor's office, I know, reached out to you about this. The goal is to be the first city in the U.S. to vaccinate 70% of the population and do it equitably. A lot going on in that statement. We're going to break it down. The mayor really wants to open up a few different things, including 2 city-run mass vaccination sites. That's very interesting. Wants to sponsor some others, get hospitals moving on this too. Kevin, I want to get down to the basics of this because I think the biggest hurdle that the mayor has certainly identified here is what we heard from her at the top of the show here, supply. Her report even shows that some of the vaccines, the number of vaccines that are coming into the state varies from week to week by a lot, by tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands in some cases.
Yeah, it's and every state and every city and county are struggling with this right now to try to build up some kind of regular capacity so everybody can have expectations about what's going to be available when the supply is still highly variable. Nobody's really saying sort of what's making it quite so variable right now. One can assume a lot of it is just manufacturing constraints right now because, we're lucky to have several of these pharma companies, in the U.S., but they're serving a lot of other countries as well, right? So including Canada. So the mayor's goal is to have 70% of the city vaccinated by October. And, if we're just talking about the residents of the city, that would be about 490,000 people. If you include the, people who commute in for work and things like that, I think her aim is kind of more like about 1 million.
Yeah, right.
70% is the point at which you would have some level of herd immunity.
Yeah,
right?
that's the number we keep hearing.
We could really start to get life back. But, we have to take a moment and pause and just consider October, right?
Okay.
Not April, not May.
Yeah, right.
Pace yourself for this marathon because, we're only just past the halfway point on this.
Yeah.
But so, as you said, the supply of doses is really the constraint here.
Mm-hmm.
The city is sort of taking a 2-pronged approach to kind of how they're rolling out their vaccination plan.
Yeah.
One part is to get to scale by having mass vaccination sites and by partnering with, large organizations, whether it's employers or, large healthcare organizations or, pharmacies like Rite Aid and Walgreens and CVS to just get a lot of it out there. So people have a lot of different places they can go.
Options,
to get it. And the other part is equity. And this is something they really handle more themselves.
Yeah.
To have these mobile vaccination teams that can partner with, community organizations to really get out there to
We'll connect
You
with
know,
these communities of color that are
communities
so
of
impacted by
color,
this. Yeah.
underrepresented communities,
Low-income people.
low-income communities that have trouble with transportation, that have
Mhm.
trouble with language access. They
Yeah.
might not necessarily have the best information about
Yeah.
vaccination. And
Right.
get to them
Right.
instead of waiting for them to sort of come to the city or the county or the healthcare provider for
Yeah.
that. So, you know, they think that together with all that, they're very shortly going to have capacity logistically in order to deliver up to about 31,000 doses a day,
Right.
which is great. But at this point right now, last week, King County, all of King County, not
Yeah, it
just
was about
Seattle, got about 43,000 doses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Which
So
is
then,
up from where they were. I mean, they've made some big strides
you
there.
know, it's going up a little bit, but
Mhm.
we're still way off from
Yeah.
31,000 doses a day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, and if we could get there, right, then we could get to 490,000
Yeah.
or 700,000 pretty quickly. But it's going to be a long slog for us.
Well, and I think it'll be a process too, Kevin, of working together because the county just opened up mass vaccination sites in Kent and Auburn here at the start of February, which I think in some ways sort of added some pressure to the city to kind of come along and make sure that something's happening here too in the city of Seattle proper. So I see that piece, these mass vaccination sites coming on in Seattle working with these mass vaccination sites that are outside of the city to try to, I don't know, again, like you say, give a lot of people options, give them different places to go to get these vaccines.
Yeah, and a lot of it, we hasn't really sort of been fully explored yet, but a lot of this has to do with just our private healthcare system, right?
Yeah, right.
Where
Yeah, people who
mostly
have
private. I
insurance
should
are
say
able to do this. Some
most,
people aren't. Yeah.
well, and it isn't really even on insurance because the government is the federal government is covering the cost of the vaccines,
Right.
delivering the vaccines, and all that
Right.
stuff, right? So it's not like we have to pay. I'm a Kaiser Permanente member. I don't have to pay Kaiser to get one, right?
Right.
So the federal government is covering that for everybody.
Right.
But it's just a question of logistically, right?
Mhm.
You have to have people who know how to deliver vaccines.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And have all logistics set up so that they can do that in a way that's safe in a pandemic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, are we better off going to a mass vaccination site at Stadium downtown? Or are we better off going to our own healthcare provider to do it?
Right.
But
Right.
then at the same time, what about all the people who don't have healthcare?
That's where I'm at. Yeah.
And how do we get to them? So it really has to be, the scale part of this has to be taking advantage of every opportunity we have to scale up.
Right. Right.
Do some things, have the city and county and state and federal government set up some sites directly, but also leverage, healthcare providers.
Of course.
Kaiser Permanente has, done an enormous amount of COVID testing themselves.
That's right. Yep.
Even though the city and the county have COVID testing sites as well, right?
Yeah.
Because they can help scale up the entire system for this.
That's what it's going to be. And they're going to be a partner, I know, in this effort going ahead. I want to switch gears a little bit here, Kevin, to talk about another story that's really unfolding this week here, the aftermath of some harsh words for the city council from U.S. District Court Judge Robart, who's overseeing the consent decree process facing the Seattle Police Department. Kevin, you dove into this on Seattle City Council Insight, and the judge was basically saying this consent decree isn't just some document. These are orders from the court. And then he said, I thought this was a very interesting quote, when they, the council, decide to take matters into their own hands in contravention of the consent decree, then they drag me into a situation that I don't want to be in, which is telling them, no, you can't do that. So the judge, I know, was glad to see some progress from the Office of Police Accountability and the Inspector General with their investigations, et cetera. But he's not happy with the council. How would you typify his reaction?
No, he isn't. And so the context of this meeting was we have a new police monitor.
That's right.
And the consent decree is kind of in this weird place right now because the first 6 years of it was all about getting the city into compliance with it. And they got there and they've kind of slid back a little bit since then. But since they sort of got to compliance, it hasn't really been as clear what the police monitor's role is, right? To sort of watch over maintaining compliance. And now we're in okay, we backslid and we have to try to fix things. But things look very different after the events of last summer and our ongoing issues of police accountability system. What is the role of the police monitor? So our new police monitor has been working with the DOJ and the city and some of the, our triumvirate of police accountability bodies to figure out a new plan for this year. And they collaboratively did this, and they built a plan, and they presented it to the judge, and Judge Robart liked it. You know,
Yes.
and he hasn't proved it yet, but he's probably gonna do that in a couple of weeks,
Hmm.
right? But then, and that all happened. That was about half an hour,
Sure.
and then
Right.
he launched into this speech.
Yeah.
And part of it was saying, hey, look, this is a hard time to be
Yeah.
doing this police reform stuff, right?
There's a
Because
lot of flux in our political
and
situation.
and it's really interesting that he talked a lot about the local political
Yeah.
environment right now, which
Yeah.
that's not something he's really done in the
No.
past, and it's not something judges usually do. But he said,
No.
look, got a mayor's up for reelection,
Yep.
or sorry, who's not running for reelection, so we're
Yeah.
gonna have a new mayor a year from now, and we don't know how that person's gonna think about
Hmm.
police reform.
Hmm.
We have 2 city council positions that are up for election this year. We
Right.
know
Right.
one of them's at least going to turn over, right?
Right.
Because Council
Because,
President Gonzalez isn't running for reelection.
and
She's
we're going
running
to
for
talk
mayor.
about that in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. We've got an interim police chief, and
Yep.
and he really dug in hard on that. He's like, we desperately don't need to
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
an interim police chief right now, and
Right.
that was his words. He
Mhm,
said, we
mhm.
desperately don't need
Yeah. That's
an
a tough
interim
thing
chief
for
right now. But
Chief Diaz to hear. Yeah.
the Mayor Durkin has said, I'm not starting the search for a new police chief until we know what our police department is going to look like.
Right.
Right.
On top of that, too, city attorney's race is involved here too. That's a
We got a
piece of this
city
puzzle.
attorney's race, so
Yeah.
we've got, and then we've got a pandemic. And
Sure,
he said,
right.
that just makes us all really, really hard to do, substantive police reform. And
Yeah.
then he launched in on the city council.
Yeah.
And, and the start of this is really kind of harkening back to what they did last summer, where they wrote their own ban on crowd control weapons.
That's right. Right.
Independent of the whole process they were supposed to go through.
Yeah.
With that's written into the consent decree process.
Mhm, mhm.
And eventually the DOJ asked Judge Robart to enjoin it and
Yeah.
to block it.
Which he
And,
did,
and
yeah.
he did,
Mhm.
right? And so, but now look at what we have going on right now, right?
Yeah.
They're in the midst of rewriting that
Mhm.
that process,
Yeah.
ban
Legislation.
and
Yeah.
they're trying, they're trying to be a little more careful to make sure they send it off to the DOJ,
Right.
and the police monitor before they actually pass anything.
Mhm.
But at the same time, they're still doing it independently of a simultaneous process
Mhm.
that the Seattle Police Department is going
Yeah.
on to revise those very same policies
Yeah.
around use of force and crowd control.
Right.
So what's going to land on the DOJ's and the police monitor's desk in a couple of weeks
Yeah.
are 2 independently created
Yeah.
sets of policy proposals
Yeah.
for use of force and crowd control weapons.
Well, and I think this is where the city council is trying to insert itself where it has not had a traditional role before, and it's not written in the consent decree. We talked about this last week. This role is not exactly defined for the council, but Councilmember Herbold, who heads the Public Safety Committee, I know has told you, hey, just because it says we can't do it doesn't mean we shouldn't
No.
be able, or just because they're not specifically
silent
listed.
on it.
Yes,
she said
right.
basically it's silent. It
Right,
doesn't say
right.
we should, and it doesn't say we can't.
Right,
So,
there you go.
And
Yeah.
she said there are a lot of city council members who really feel like strongly we should legislate on this.
Right.
So Robart,
Right.
kind of pointed to that, and he also had some comments basically on the fact that last summer the city council got way out ahead of themselves and saying
Yeah.
we're going to defund by 50%,
Right.
without any kind of plan for how to do that. And even
Yeah.
now, next week, they're or maybe even as soon as this week, they're going to be taking up a bill to cut another $5.4 million from
Yeah.
SPD.
Yeah.
Right. And the judge was pretty clear. It's like, you need, he said, you need to have a plan for how you're going to replace essential resources
Yeah.
before you start making big cuts to the police department, or you're going to force me to rule I don't want to have, which is stepping in again and saying, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, some harsh words, some important words. We're going to hear a few more words here in our next segment. Now hear this. So who wants to be mayor of this here town? Well, Council President Lorena Gonzalez has thrown her hat into the ring. Another big name, of course, Colleen Echo Hawk jumped in the week before. Gonzalez is touting her work on the city council over the last 6 years as an important part of her experience, and why not? Also, she's talking about her ability to work with the council too, if elected. Let's listen.
That doesn't mean we're going to agree 100% of the time. I don't think anybody's looking for 100% agreement all the time. But it is about making sure that you have a strong working relationship with a co-equal branch of government.
Kevin, some thoughts on this. I think we can say safely that the council isn't riding a big wave of popularity right now. Is this idea of uniting the council and the mayor's office is it going to work? Do you see people buying into that? Your thoughts about what Council President Gonzalez is saying?
Yeah, well, there's certainly a set of people in the city who are very upset that the mayor and the city council have
Or
not been
so,
able to work
yeah.
together, right?
Hmm.
But there's another part of this, which is, as we were talking about earlier,
Hmm.
the city council seems pretty impulsive these days. They seem to be, doing things quickly without really kind of thinking about the larger consequences of them, or at least there seem to be a lot of people in the city who believe that's what the city is doing.
Sure. Yeah.
So to the extent that the issue is, can the mayor's office and the city council get on the same page?
Yeah.
I think Councilmember Gonzalez, Council President Gonzalez,
Hmm.
might be able to do some good there.
Sure.
But on this larger issue, having a mayor that comes out of the city council who's been, a part of this, what appears to be fairly impulsive process,
Yeah.
could just make things worse,
Yeah.
right? Because then we'd
Yeah.
have, most of city government
Yeah.
just,
Right.
very, very quickly sort of knee jerking around.
I was going to say, and I think the mayor and the city council, there's an important back and forth, some checks and balances
Oh
that
yeah,
go on there.
yeah.
It's been, I will say, it's been frosty during the Durkin administration. Certainly last year, I talked with Councilmember Herbold in the fall, and she's been in City Hall for decades, right? And she said it's never been worse. They came to an understanding through the budget process there, but also through that process, Mayor Durkin decided to leave. I mean, she's not going to be running again. So I think it's going to be a challenge for Council President Gonzalez to tout her experience and the work that she's doing on the council. She can't really escape that, but trying to separate herself out as her own leader. Do you see that dynamic maybe coming into play?
Yeah, and when you think about just the last year,
Yeah.
she has not really been a vocal leader on
Mm.
the city council, right? When you
Mm.
think about the extent to which Councilmember Sawant has really been pushing a lot
Sure.
of issues.
Hmm.
Council member Mosqueda has pushed through a lot of the budget stuff,
Yeah.
and was really the person pushing hardest on defund, and one of the people pushing hardest on
The defund
making
effort,
big
yeah.
budget cuts to SPD last
Mhm.
summer. Councilmember Lewis has been pushing really hard on the homelessness
Yeah.
issues. And during all the riots last summer, during the
Sure.
the nightly riots that went on for weeks and weeks
Yes.
and weeks,
Yes.
I've heard many people in the city say, where was the council? There were a
Yeah.
couple nights where they went out there. For the most part,
Hmm.
they would show up at city council meetings and say bad things about SPD,
Yeah.
but wouldn't really say much about all the damage that was being done to businesses,
Sure.
right, and
Right.
communities, and
Right.
by writers and people
Right.
doing damage out there to
Right.
property,
Right.
and that ticked a lot of people off. So I think she's going to get some hard questions about the kind of leader that she's been over the last year,
Yeah.
as president.
And she should,
of
yeah,
the
as any leader should. But that's going to be a test. I reached out to Tim Burgess just for grins and asked him, and he said he hasn't ruled out the idea yet, but I know he wants to get involved with his political action committee again. So we'll see what pans out there. A few other,
the political
that's going to
action
be big
committees.
again. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think so far I've heard certainly Mosqueda has already qualified for the democracy vouchers program,
Yeah.
which is going to
Yeah.
limit sort of her own campaign spending.
Yes.
But she's got big labor behind her. So,
Yep.
their PACs are going to be spending tons of money on that.
Absolutely.
One can assume that I believe I've heard Council President Gonzalez say that she also wants to qualify for the democracy vouchers program.
Mhm.
But she's going to have some big money behind her
Yeah.
as well from advocacy groups in
Sure.
the city, potentially, certainly, immigrant
rights groups. Yeah.
groups,
Mhm.
but potentially labor as well. She's been a pretty good friend to labor. So, there's going to be a lot of money on that side, and we'll
Yeah.
see, whether, what happened with Amazon 2 years ago scares big business away from, the Chamber of
Investing.
Commerce away from trying to put, a
Yeah.
lot of money in
I
it.
wonder, just the fact that there are citywide races this year, I think is a little bit of a different dynamic rather than the district races we saw 2 years ago. But that's going to be a really important thing to keep track of. And I will say also, Sarah Nelson is going to be running for Lorena Gonzalez's position 9 seat, one of the bigger names involved here. She, of course, was legislative assistant under former council member Richard Conlon. She ran for council 4 years ago, came in third place. And on her press release, I will not endorse any candidate, just not the way I work. But she did say she watches the Seattle channel for fun. And I'm just going to say, any candidate out there, that needs to be on the resume. That's a very
Is that a
important part.
plus or a minus, though?
It's
Really?
great. I think it's a bit of a left-handed compliment, to be honest, but interesting to see there.
So these city council races are getting to be interesting, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
So in position 8,
Mhm.
we have Mosqueda clearly running for re-election. There are a
Yep.
couple people you've never heard of before who are running against filed to run against her.
Yes.
And filing is open until May, so we have a long way to
Got
go.
a long way to go. Yep.
A lot of runway on that. But at this point, I think that position maybe Mosqueda's to lose. But now with Gonzalez running for mayor, position 9 is wide open. And Sarah Nelson is really the first one out of the gate on that, but there will be more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
She's got some work to do on that. When she ran for a citywide position last time, basically came in third, didn't make it through to the primary. So she's got to work.
It'll be interesting to see who steps up, given that if Mosqueda were running for re-election and Gonzalez were running for re-election, if there were incumbents in both those two positions, that would scare a lot of people off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
From taking a first run at this, right?
Yeah.
But now we have one open position.
Yeah.
And that's going to attract a different set of people.
Yeah.
It's always interesting to see, who wants to run against the incumbent
Mm-hmm.
and who wants to run in the open position.
Yeah, right. That's a good observation. Picking that other spot, I think Nelson was biding her time on that one for sure. I want to talk about Councilmember Mosqueda and the hazard pay ordinance that she worked on just a couple weeks ago to pass. With regard to this, Council passed this emergency measure, as we know, to tack on $4 extra per hour onto grocery store worker pay. We're talking about the big chains out there. This is hazard pay, as the council understands it. But now the Northwest Grocery Association and the Washington Food Industry Association are suing. So, Kevin, the way this breaks down for me, the stores are saying we're being singled out as an industry here, and this doesn't make sense. So, and also I should say that government is meddling in some of their contract negotiations. How do you see this case playing out?
Yeah, so their complaint that they filed, has sort of 3 legal bases in it.
Yeah. One
is they say that that the $4 hazard pay is a violation of the National Labor Relations Act.
Yeah.
Which it has been like the subject of decades and decades and decades of litigation, because it very vaguely says there are some things which are sort of preempted. There are places where local governments and state governments can legislate, and there are things that are intended to be left open to just economic forces, right?
Yeah.
To the power of bargaining between workers
and employers,
and employers. And where those lines are drawn is just like I said, endless litigation. So they say this is on the side of something that is actually preempted from litigation, from legislation. So the city council can't do that. And it's hard to say where that's going to go, but that's not particularly a strong case. They also say that that this is impairing the contracts that they already have between the unions representing the employees and the employers, that say here's how much is in place, we'll get paid. That's not a really great argument either.
Okay.
Mostly because that's a sort of argument that right now, in the midst of this COVID emergency, the courts over and over again have basically given great deference to local governments to say, hey, do what you think you need to do.
Right.
To get your community through this.
Yeah.
This probably the strongest part of the argument is the third thing they said, which is that this violates the equal protection clauses in both the U.S. and state constitutions.
Right.
And by that, they're saying, hey, look, your grocery store companies have to do this, but not drugstore companies.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And not, post offices and not all the other essential retail.
Sure. There's some healthcare workers too that aren't.
Why are you singling us out? Right. You can't do that. Right. That violates equal protection.
Yeah.
That's a pretty strong argument.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I wonder how that one plays out. And I mean, when you throw in this whole $4 an hour and where that figure really came from, I know you did some research on that too. This will be an interesting one to see play out for the grocery stores. It's
going to play out slowly, right? They're going to ask for preliminary injunction,
right?
And they're almost certainly not going to get it, because one of the things for one of the 4 things you have to get for a preliminary injunction is you have to show that you're going to suffer irreparable harm.
I knew you were going to go there. Yep.
Irreparable harm, because you can't wait until this court case to play all the way out to the end, right?
Yeah.
There's going to be, things that happen now that are irreparable that you will suffer while this case is pending. Right?
Sure. Right.
And in this case, the only harm they're suffering is money.
Yeah, which
right?
could be made up
so,
with.
The courts could order the city to pay them back.
Sure. Right.
So there is, and courts have found over and over and over again that if it's just a matter of money, it's not irreparable harm.
Right.
It gets weirder in cases like the eviction stuff where okay, if I end up not having the money and defaulting on my mortgage, that could be irreparable harm.
Yeah.
But nobody's going to argue that these large grocery chains have that kind of issue. Right.
Well, we need to keep track of this one, Kevin, and I want to talk about our next segment too, with regard to our homeless authority here, the Regional Homeless Authority. That's in our final segment here. What's next? Close to the end of last week, we heard about it. A new CEO for the Regional Homelessness Authority, Regina Cannon, has been offered the job here. Looks like some good progress here, I should say. Always good process in Seattle, isn't it? This has taken more than a year, but this is finally in place. Regina Cannon, the offer's been made to her. A lot of local leaders are excited about her, brings a strong racial equity background to her work. But this is the start of a huge job here, Kevin. I wanted to ask you about this. The fact that there is somebody in the mix, that sounds good, but the job ahead of Regina Cannon is a massive one, if indeed she takes the position.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt she's going to take the position, but it's huge, and just a ton of progress over the last several months has been blocked, basically out of the gate for the Regional Homeless Authority because they haven't had a CEO, right?
Yeah,
she's going to have like 90 days to figure out her own organization that she wants to have within the Regional Homeless Authority, how exactly she wants to structure the various groups that are coming over from the City of Seattle's Department of Human Services, and from the equivalent organization in King County government, how she needs to structure that. So she's got to propose back to the governing board and the implementation committee how that's all going to work, and then they have to actually move those groups over and do that transfer and the integration of the two groups. That's what's ahead of her right now, and they should have been done with that by now, but because because the CO process took so long, they're not there now. I think she's, like you mentioned, bringing some pretty exciting credentials with her, right? 18
the racial
years,
equity piece is huge.
18 years of anti-poverty initiatives, work that she's done. She's currently the Chief Equity and Impact Officer at the Center for Social Innovation. Before that, she was the Southeast Director for a supportive housing group. So, she brings some great credentials, a lot of strength. The job, even beyond just the next several months of trying to do all that integration work is going to be hard because her job is going to largely be to make peace between Seattle and King County and all the smaller cities and towns.
Yes, that's
that really are not on the same policy page on how to move forward with this.
No. And are they going to be doing things that are data-based, science-based, or whatever else?
Evidence-based.
Yes, all that. That's going to be a huge piece of it. And also, she's got to oversee, in some ways at least, a new health through housing plan, this new 0.1% sales tax that King County is collecting to try to build affordable housing. So this job just scales up in my mind so quickly. I know she's got a ton ahead of her. But Kevin, we got to work it in here as we wrap up the show here. The tasty treats are always a big part of our program here. And I may present to you, the scones are keeping on rolling through my house right now.
Oh, wow.
This is the lavender honey scone. I wonder if I can get a good shot of it.
Lavender's fun to work with.
Yeah,
it's really subtle, but
it's not by itself, not so much. But when you throw it in with the honey, and there's a little sugar glaze on top of that, that's Dad talking right there. But my daughters make these things. That's what makes it great when those two flavors go together, I think.
Yeah, it's really easy to overpower lavender. You have to be super careful with it, but it's a really great. One of the things I like doing is you can get some lavender, either like you grow a little bit. It grows really easy just in gardens around here. Get a little bit, and then you can make your own lavender extract with it. Basically, you take some, you throw it in a little jar with some vodka.
Good to go.
And shake it up every couple of days. Leave it a couple of weeks, and you're going to end up with that. So I've had a bread baking week.
Nice.
I got my go-to multi-grain kind of sandwich and toast bread.
Love it. Okay.
weekend, I made a bunch of Hawaiian bread too.
Oh, you're not messing around.
It's like Pac-Man.
Yeah, waka waka. Yeah,
Love it. It's the Pac-Man bread, but
Love it.
Oh, it's just so good. You know, use pineapple juice in making it, so it comes out nice and sweet, and it's just great stuff.
That part out of the middle, you just took a big bite, probably.
Absolutely unhealthy free, but you know. We're all trying to get through COVID. We're all trying to get through COVID. These are the things we have to do.
Got to get the bread going on through. Well, Kevin, I thank you as always for a wonderful back and forth. And let me clink mugs with you if I can, right with the camera. Right. Here we got it.
Clink.
And clink. Got it. Thanks a lot, man, as always. And hey, if you want to get in on the deal, support us on Patreon at the $10 a month level. Pretty pleased to get your very own Seattle News, Views, and Brews coffee mug. Thanks, everybody, for checking in here to Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen, and please do support us on Patreon if you like what you're hearing. We depend on you. We need your help to keep this going. Thank you for listening. Thanks for watching on Converge Media 2. We will see you next time. Cheers. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2021.